But I never used the word Martin. George Albert Pauls.
George Albert Pauls. Okay, this is December 12th, 1984.
Yeah.
This is Bernice Jackson and Joe Todd. An interview with Mr. George Albert Pauls in Buffalo, Oklahoma. Mr. Pauls, where were you born?
Chicago. 1900 and June 22nd.
June 26, 1900?
22nd.
22nd.
Yeah, 1900. Ain't no trouble to keep me how old I am. See, I'm 84, whatever it is. Why?
Who was your father?
Well, he came from Germany. His name was Henry Paul. See, he was a sailor, and he used to sail from Germany to Chicago, and when they got in Chicago and they unloaded their boats and stuff, why they stayed at a boarding house there. My mother's mother run this boarding house, and my mother was only about, I don't know, 14, 15 years old when they got married. She married my father. He was about 10, 12 years older than her.
What was her name?
Carolyn Remsnyder, if you could spell it.
How do you spell that?
I don't know. There's 14 kids in our family, 8 boys and 6 girls, and I'm the baby.
When did your father come to this country? What year?
Well, he come a long time before I was born, because I was a baby and there's 14 kids born. See, that'd be, I wouldn't know how to guess. But his father owned a bunch of vessels, and they hauled from Germany on boats and stuff, and his brother and them were sailors, and they was coming what caused him to quit is they was coming there the last load, and they got in a storm in Lake Michigan, and the boat went down, and my father's father and his brother all drowned, and my father swam about 7 miles in Lake Michigan, see, to shore, and broke both eardrums, and he was deaf, you know. And of course he was married to my mother at that time, see, and then he never sailed no more after that. And then he worked in the packing house there in Chicago for, I don't know how long. He was working there when I was born. I remember that. Armour's packing house, see. Armour's, one of the biggest packing houses in the country. And him and this, you don't need to put this down, but him and this Miss Zahner's father, old man Zahner, both worked in that packing house together. And then that Zahner is the one that come here and filed on the homestead and got me in this mess, see.
I see.
My father come out here and they filed on the homestead here, see.
What year did he come?
Well, we come here in 1910 is when we filed on it, 1910 here at Supply. I was just 10 years, well, I wouldn't be 10 till in June, and this was February the 14th, 1910, and they got off the train at Tangier from Chicago, my brother, 4 years old, and my sister and mother and I, see.
Yes.
And we come across from Tangier to Supply, and that was the 14th day of February, Valentine's Day. And you couldn't see the mule's ears for sand blowing down where the lake is now, see.
Yeah.
And we was sitting there in that old covered wagon, see, just a flopping and banging, old Garnett's, you know, Gene Garnett's brother.
Right.
He knows him. And I said to myself, I wish we had something to make it wet here, see. And I've always thought of that. When I introduced that bill to build that Fort Supply Dam, I've always thought of that trip across there, you know.
You bet.
Now it's a lake, big lake there, see, now.
So your father bought a relinquishment?
Yeah, he bought a relinquishment. He gave $400 for a team of horses, an old sow and a bunch of pigs and a lot of chickens and all that stuff. He got it all for $400, and this bachelor lived on the place over a year, and we didn't have to live only about a year more till he proved it off, see. And then in 1920, 10 years later, he sold it to Randall's. You come by from Supply up this way, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
There's a big tower on the east side of the road between here and Supply.
Uh-huh.
That's the place we owned. Right there, filed on that, 1910.
Did your father farm down here?
Oh, well, he stayed. When he sent us, my mother and us kids out here, see, to live on the place, well, he stayed in Chicago and worked there in Armour's packing house, and about once every 2 weeks he'd send $10 or $15 for to live on, you know. And of course, we had a nice home in Chicago, and one of my other brothers and him lived there, and then later on he sold that, see, for $2,500. That's a lot of money then.
What part of Chicago?
And well, it's southwest, 2131 South Oakley Avenue. That's a boulevard now, but it used to be an alley. Now it's a boulevard.
Was your father in Chicago during the Great Fire? Great
Yeah,
Chicago
they was
Fire?
both there, right close to where they lived.
Did they ever talk about that? The Great Chicago Fire?
Oh yeah, they told us, and I know right where it was myself after I growed up. See, after I come here in 1920, why I went back after we sold out here. I went back and I worked in Chicago. My brother's oldest brother, he run 2 saloons, and he was quite a politician then. And big old Mayor Thompson was his mayor then, and get anybody a job, you know. And I worked in the Chicago Tunnel there. He had my brother's brother-in-law. He's a foreman in the Chicago Tunnel, and it goes under the Chicago Bridge. This tunnel does from one building to another, and that's where I worked. 75 cents an hour.
What'd you do?
1920, huh?
What'd you do there?
Oh, they didn't have much of a bridge across there. Trucks couldn't go across the river there. And they'd come there to this loading dock, see, all great big trucks with groceries and everything. And they'd back up there, and then they had cars, and they'd load that in there, and they'd go down about 200-300 feet under the ground, see. And all underneath there, they had these little railroads. And there's cars there, they shipped stuff to Woodward, Oklahoma down there. I saw that one, and it was bigger than this room, a whole lot taller, and they had wires, you know, electric wires, you know, for running all the full length of that, there for a couple miles. And then after they got farther away, why they'd unload that and they'd haul it there, and they'd go to different places, St. Louis and all over. Them cars would be loaded, you know, with this groceries and everything, these clothes and boots, and when I got down in there, I never will forget that. It's right about Christmas time, and we'd unload. At first I loaded on the dock up above, and then later on I got down below. We got a nickel or a dime more for working there an hour. And we got down there, he had to wear boots or a raincoat. The water dripped, you know. And they had great big buckets full of Christmas candy and all that stuff. And when he'd sit around at noon eating, why, the boss, he'd look around and find us which one had chocolates in, and he'd take a hammer and open it, and when we got through eating, we'd fill our dinner buckets full of chocolates and take them home, see. And if you didn't do it, you got fired, see. Then they even stole shoes. They take off, just before they go home, why, they take off their old shoes, you know, and put on a good pair, see. And that, I worked there, I don't know, for 4 or 5 months, and then I had to come back to Oklahoma. And since then, I went back there and worked with iron workers, machinery movers, and all that the last few years.
Tell me about the Great Chicago Fire. What did your father
Well,
say
I
about
don't know. My mother, they used to talk about it, said, old lady was milking the cow, and she kicked the lantern over and set the house on. Old lady Flaherty, see, she was the one that, they only lived, my mother and dad and them only lived, I don't know, half a mile or something like that, right across the river from, it was on the south side of the river. That's where they lived, where this barn burnt down, you know. No, it burnt the whole outfit out. They talked about it a lot of times. And then another thing, when I was there, I remember that. I was just a kid, but I remember these meters up here, you've seen stars shoot across the sky. You have, haven't you?
Yes.
Well, that's a meter, they call it, see? And a piece of one of them fell, and they had sidewalk along State Street, see, wide sidewalk about it, and that thing come down and it went 20 foot in the ground right through that sidewalk. And they still got that place there in Chicago when I was back there in 1960, 65. They've got a big monument there, shows where this meter went down, you know. They call it a star, but it's just a piece off a star, you know.
Right.
And that thing went down in the ground about 20 feet.
Is it still there?
Well, they had it all fenced and everything, and a big bronze monument there and everything.
Can you look down the hole and see it?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't, because you see that happened 40 years before when I was just a kid, that's when it went down, see. And I don't know, I must have been only 4 or 5 years old when it fell, see, and then when we come back, why, we'd watch you, well, you can see them yourself, you'll see a star shoot, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what they call a meter, see, it's just a piece off a star. It ain't a whole star. If it was a whole star, it'd wreck the whole city.
Whenever you first moved down to Oklahoma, what chores did you do on the farm?
Oh, we had this team of horses, and then we had a sod plow, and this old bachelor, he had about 20 acres broke out, see, and then we broke out some more with a walking sod plow, a team of horses, you know, and we planted it some broom corn and stuff like that.
How many acres could you break out in one day?
Oh, I don't know. I was only 10 years old, and older brothers, they done the plowing. And we had a cow or two there. I helped do the milk, and we had maybe a couple dozen chickens. And eggs was only worth about 6 cents a dozen then. Wouldn't pay for the wear and tear on a hen.
Would you describe moving from the city of Chicago to a homestead in Oklahoma?
Well, just like I told you, when we got off of Tangier, the train stopped there at Tangier. Instead of getting off at Woodward, while we got off Tangier west of there, you know, and then come across the mail hack, run from there to Supply, and then from Supply up here to Charleston. He knows where Charleston is over here. And we rode the mail hack to Supply, and then this man, Zahner, he come down there and got us. And we had a sod house. It was dug down about 4 feet. It was about 24 by 24, just one big room, see, and sod from the ground on up, and just had 2 or 3 windows around. And this guy, he had a little old barn and a little old hog pen, and we bought it from him. He moved out. He's an old bachelor. And then my dad, when we sold the place there in Chicago, why, he came out about 3 years later, him and my other brothers. They went to school and then come out. And by that time, why, there's a lot of people that quit, you know, and we get their land and farm it, see. They move out, and the ranchmen's around and buy it for $300 or $400 or $500 an acre, I mean, for the whole place. And we farmed down there. We kept getting bigger and bigger, farming more and more, and then when we had broom corn, why, the neighbors around there got a baler and stuff, and we hauled it to Woodward. The contractor, he'd come out. Now there's another thing, he'd come out from Woodward, you know, while you was still pulling that darn broom corn, and you'd have 3 or 4 stalks of cane. He'd give you so much, $35, $40 a ton, see, and as soon as we signed a contract, we'd pull everything, cane and all, and put right in the broom corn, see.
How do you pull broom corn?
He knows how, don't you? No, it just grows up there, and you get a hold of the leaf and just give her a jerk, and it comes right out, see. Your hands, if you can't hardly pull it with gloves, you've got to pull it. And they've got 4 or 5 different kinds. They call the Japanese broom corn. It's only that high. You make whisk brooms out of it, see. Little brush, only about that long. And it don't weigh nothing for a ton. You have to have a whole field to get a ton, and they didn't use that. And then they had standard as tall as this room, and they make these warehouse brooms out of it, you see, for these big warehouses, and it had brush that long.
Well, how do you pull it if it's...
Well, you get up there and just grab a hold of it and bend it, see, and another guy comes behind with a knife and he cuts it. You can't pull it, you gotta cut it, see. It's a great big long brush, see, and it, we've had a size, it take about, these bales that weigh about 300 pounds, 5 wires, and we've had that standard. They didn't want to buy it though, they didn't have much of a market, but the dwarf was about this high, and that was the best, you got the most money for that.
Where was the broom factory?
Myers was his name in Woodward. He had a livery barn and he bought all the broom corn and he shipped it to St. Louis and around, and he made what brooms they needed there, you know, in Woodward and around. And across the river, this north of Woodward, had to drive across, and this one fella, he was a bachelor down there. He was related to Zayners here, and I'd ride with 6 and 7 of us. He'd load up, and we put 5 bales lengthways and 1 on each side. Had some 4x4s across. We hauled 7 bales, and that'd be a little over a ton, see, for 2 horses. And we'd all go together when we'd seed it, and then we'd all go together, load it up, and then we'd all take out, see, about 6 or 7 wagons before daylight, headed from Woodward from down here. And we'd get in there all before sundown, see. And we had it sold, see, to this Myers here, his livery barn. And we'd put our horses up and then sleep in the haymow, see. Had pigeons up there and they kept you awake, you know. And this Pete that I was telling you about, I rode with him. He had the last wagon, and we crossed the river, and he had a half a bushel bucket in the wagon. And he said, George, he said, you jump out. And I said, what do you want me to do? Here in the creek, the water's about half knee deep, see. Yeah, and he said, give me some water. And so I jumped out and I dipped the water up and he put in these bales, see. So they'd weigh more, see. See? And I said, why, Pete, I said, you can't get by that way. Yeah, we get by. He said, it'll all swell up tonight and it'll be heavy in the morning. And we went in, you know, and I told my brother different ones on old Gene Garnett and a bunch of them what we'd done. And they said, why, you crazy fool, them bales will all bust. And sure enough, we got up the next morning and there was 2 bales that had busted the wire. And the broom cord laid on the ground, you know, soaking wet. And we called Myers, the guy, the contractor, bought it all, you know, the main boss. He said, what happened here? Did the horses get into it? I said, no, I don't think so. And then he grabbed a hold of it and he went to twisting it, you know, just like a rope. And he said, well, where'd all this water come from? And in the bottom of the wagon, you could still see water underneath. So he knocked that old boy about $25 on the load for water. Oh, I'll tell you this. They used to do anything to get by then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then we went, this old Pete, he couldn't talk English very well. And they had a woman down there in that neighborhood. There's about 5 or 6 of these old guys was all bachelors, see, all old bachelors, see.
Yeah.
And they only had one old maid down there. She had a great big wart on her cheek here. Cindy, they called her, see. And every one of them would kind of knuckle up to her, see. They all liked her, and she was a good old cook, you know. Wherever we eat, while she went from one house to the other helping. When we seeded this broom corn, I'd hold her over the cylinder. And we went there to Baker's Hotel to eat breakfast, see.
Yeah.
And all of us sitting around the table, you get a breakfast for a quarter then. And this Pete was sitting next to me, see. And when we got about through eating, he got his pocketbook out, you know, and he fished around, he found a quarter. And he put it under his plate, see, and they had a couple waitresses in there. And we got up, you know, and all the rest of us just sat around there, and this old Gene Garnett down here was sitting next to me, said, get that quarter, George, get that quarter. And of course I did. I raised the plate up and took it out and put it in my pocket. And old Pete, he went out there and they had a big plate glass door, and he was standing around looking through there to see that old girl when she picked up this plate, she grinned, you know, when she found that quarter. And he then finally went around and looked through the window, and he never saw her get the quarter. And when he got outside, he said, I wonder why that girl didn't want that quarter. I said, Pete, she didn't want it because I had it. He said, boy, he hit me right up beside the face. He said, she didn't know anything about it. Boy, he popped it to me. I never will forget that. Heck, I wasn't very big, but they had a cylinder with nails in it, see, and that horsepower that drove the power and turned that cylinder. And it was about 4 feet long, and 2 of us would hold this brush over, you know. And
Is that what took the seeds off?
yeah. And then they throwed it in there, you know, and then there's a guy with the baler in the baler, and they carried it to him, and then they had a horse that squeezed the baler, see. It'd be as big as this here, and then when he'd go around, why, it'd just be about 4 feet, you know, squeeze that baler, and then they had wires, they put number 9 wires, 5 of them around them darn bales. That's all about $30 a ton is what they got for it. And you know what broom corn's worth now?
What?
$550, $600 a ton.
It is.
Yeah. And you don't see anybody raise it, see, anymore. There's 2 or 3 years ago out here, there's a guy come in from St. Louis, and that's another broom corn story we had. He knew this county commissioner we had, Earl Anderson. You knew him.
Yes.
He lived right out east of town here where the feedlot is, see. And he had a sod house there, and he had a big cook stove in this sod house, nobody living there, and he'd sold this broom corn for about $400 a ton. So a Jew from St. Louis come out here and bought around there with the neighborhood, you know. And he put a tag on each bale, you know, who he bought it from, and then he hauled it down here at the depot and loaded it in cars, see, and shipped it to St. Louis. Well, this Earl Anderson, I was relief administrator here then. It's in the dirty 30s. And he come to me one day and he said, George, he said, I'm seeding broom corn out there today, and he said, I need 3 or 4 hands. You got anybody that'll help? And I said, yeah, well, there's old Charlie Collier and some of them old boys, he knew them all. And they said, yeah, we'll go out there. He said, I'll give you $3, he said, to help me seed out there. So they went out there, and old Charlie got up in the baler seed. And as they were seeding it, I wasn't helping seed it because I had other work to do. But anyhow, they said he took them lids off of the stove and put in this baler, see. He'd sold it, see. And he was getting $400 a ton for that old stove, see. They just had to put that in that stove. They put the whole stove in the balers when he got through. And they hauled it down here to the depot, you know, this Anderson. He was our county commissioner then, see. And it was before Christmas. It was in November when they done that, when they seeded it. And along about, just about this time, a little bit, about the 20th of December, I went down to the depot and to mail the payrolls. They wouldn't let you mail them through the mail. You had to ship them by express to Oklahoma City, the relief payrolls. Oh, they'd be that big around. And Russell was agent, and he said, George, he said, did you see Earl Anderson up there this morning? And I said, yeah, he told me to ask. He said he sent for some tractor parts. And he said he's looking for them in, and he said, well, he's got a big box there now out here in the warehouse. And we went out there. It was about half as big as that. And it was 3x12 bridge planks, and it had 90 penny spikes drove in it, you know, to make it solid. Oh, it was heavy. And he said there's $27 express charges on this box. County commissioner. And I said, well, I figured it was a Caterpillar parts, you know, for the tractors and stuff. And I went back down to the courthouse and I said, Earl, your repairs is all down there at the depot. And he said, fine. And so he said, I'll call over to Selma and have him come over. So Ernest Martin come over, and they went down and got him. He paid off. And we got over there to Selma, why he couldn't hardly get the thing unloaded. You see, it had them 90-penny spikes in it. And they pried it loose, and when they got it all in there was a nice wreath in there with a card from this contractor, St. Louis, and he said, "Wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I hope you bake biscuits with this stove. I send it back to you." So he sent that darn cook stove all the way back, my gosh, to this county commissioner. And then we used to tell him he passed the plates, up here at the Christian church. He was so nice guy. And I said, one fellow said one day he gave him $1 and he didn't want to put it all in, see? So he said, "Give me some change." And old Earl just took the $1 and shoved it in his pocket and handed him back a quarter. So he said he'd take out $1 and he'd put back a quarter in the plate. That's the way he would do it, see? And he finally got beat the next year when he run for county commissioner. They told that Broom court story on him.
What was his name?
Earl Anderson.
Yeah.
He owned his land out here with his feedlot. He's east of town here now. They got a big feedlot out there. Yeah, and they got, wish you a happy, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. He showed that little wreath they had and a nice card there, $26.
I thought that's the way that story was going to end.
Yeah. That's the way they used to do here. My brother-in-law and them lived in Chicago, and rabbits, cottontails is about, at that time, about $1 a pair, You'd go down on Ashland Avenue or down there, and they'd have a wooden barrel, and they'd have a pair of rabbits tied together, and one be on the inside and the other on the outside, I remember my dad, he'd go and feel of the back of them and see if they're fat or whatever it was, and buy them. And when we come out here at that time, boy, rabbits, there was hundreds of them, And of course we had an old long time shotgun barrel, 36 inches long, and you get them cheap shells, and then we trapped them, and we'd cut the entrails out, and then freeze them good, and ship a whole barrel full back to my brother-in-law in Chicago. It cost about $3 or $4 then to ship them, see, and then he'd sell them out for 75 cents and $1 a pair. See, after we sold rabbits in the winter time. Boy, we had a hard time getting by. He don't know much about that, see. He left here. You wasn't only about 15 years old when you left, was you?
No, I was 17. I left in 32. Dad was here. They were doing a lot of coyotes and rabbit hunts around here then.
Well, that's another thing I done when I was in the legislature. I had good greyhounds, and I run them on the track down at Anadarko and around, and the fella took them to Florida and run them, and then when they could bring them back in the wintertime, I'd catch coyotes with them. And when I was in the legislature, I introduced a bill to pay $10 bounty on coyotes, see? $10 a head, for a pair of ears, And of course, we'd catch 20, 25, 30, 40 pair coyotes every winter, with these hounds. And I had all these old boys around here that had coyote dogs, and I took 1,400 pair down to Oklahoma City at one time when old Red Phillips was governor. And I was
rabbit ears?
No, coyote ears.
Coyote ears.
Yeah, T.D. Carlisle and all these guys had caught them, and they put them in a bag, just cut the ears off and tie them together. And we only appropriated $50,000 a year for rabbit ears was 10 cents, and crow ears was 10 cents, or crow heads, and chicken hawks was 10 cents, but coyotes was $10, see?
Oh.
And boy, the next year when I went back, why, we had to appropriate more money, and they said, "Why, we ain't gonna appropriate any more money. You got half of it out there in Harper County." And we did. Right now, they had a coyote drive about a week ago right up north here, but Willard, where Grace and them lives, and they caught 11 coyotes.
Is that right?
They seen 20, and they caught 11 with dogs, in a pickup. They got a crate on there, and they drive around through the pastures, and they've got two ways. All of them's got a two-way. And if they see a coyote and then guy with an airplane, Odin Shepherd with the airplane, if he sees one, why he'll go round and around, you know, and whoever's close, they go. And then they'll holler over that two-way, you know, to the other guy. They're going that way, see? And boy, they catch most of them. Before I got in here, my son-in-law up here, his wife, she's county treasurer down here. They had some good dogs and two-ways, and we'd go out and catch them. And now they ain't got any bounty on them at all. See? We had bounty 2 years, and we got done pretty good.
That's good. When did you decide to run for senator?
Well, I was city manager here. You wouldn't call it manager. They didn't call it manager, but they had a wooden water line from here to Dobie Springs, 10-inch line, see? And it leaked so bad, blowout and everything, they'd be out of water for a week at a time here, see? And I was plumber down at the nut house at Supply, and they got me to come up here and work on that water line, see? And the city did. I was pitching ball, and they give me $10 a game for pitching ball, and gave me this job, water superintendent, $150 a month. That was in '28. And then they gave me the chief of police and the fire chief and day marshal and poll tax collector and street commissioner and water superintendent, dog catcher, all for $150 a month, see. And I had to furnish my own pickup and all too, see. And everybody thought I was getting rich. And then when I see this water line went bad and they didn't have much money, and they had this big salt factory over across the river over here with a 10-inch line, and they went broke, and they had about over 3 miles of that good pipe over there across the river. And I was running relief then, you know, and the town board, and Hi Arnold, he was the head of the highway department up here, you know, H.N. Arnold. And they didn't have hardly any money, and I went over there and I bought that whole smear of pipe for $375. And then I used a crew over there digging it out, you know, and had a bunch digging it in over here, and a bunch hauling it over here, and all on relief, see. In the first month we got $1,000 for the county, and I was supposed to get $300 out of that for my salary and expense. And this Hi Arnold made me send a check back, and they gave me a check for $50, see. And the rest of the money went back in the pots, you know, to buy pipe and stuff.
Why?
And the last I held the job 2 years. Old Bill, he went out. When he went out, and
Bill Murry?
yeah, see, he was quitting, and Hoover got beat, and Roosevelt was taking over, you know, and Bill couldn't get along with him. See, he couldn't get much money. Why, he had us quit. All us guys quit, see. And of course, I went back with this water line and selling John Deeres and everything else. In the last month that we worked here, we got $40,000 for this county, just this county. And we put that whole 8 miles of pipe in, see. And with it done without it, it didn't cost them nothing for labor, see. We used it. Coming over them hills there, that old wooden line, they was supposed to go down 20 feet deep with it. See, didn't have a pump on it, it was gravity. The Dobie Springs out there is 100 feet higher than Buffalo is, higher than this water tower. And water come in over them hills, you know, gravity feed all the way. And down in the draws, in the valleys, it'd be 100-pound pressure. And you get a leak on that wooden water line as big as your finger, it'll squirt 50 feet in the air, you know, work the dirt off and then go right up in there. I'd go out with wooden plugs and drive a plug in there. Boy, we had a time. And that relief is where they got all this water now. Now they got a good line all the way.
Mm-hmm. When were you first elected to Oklahoma City?
Well, I was in '33. See, old Bill was still on. I was elected in November, see, and then I went down there, and then Marland took over the 20th of January. And I was in there 4 years with him, and then he quit, and they had Roosevelt was the president, and they got some fella from, he belonged to the government some way, and he run again Red Phillips for governor here. I forget what his name was now. But anyhow, Red was elected. And when he was elected, him and Marland didn't get along, see. He fired about everybody that Marland had on there, you know. And of course, I had one or two. I had tag agents and port of entries and I don't know what all on the, and he began canning them, see, because I didn't vote for him, see. And oh, I'll tell you, it was dog eat dog.
Tell me about Bill Murry. What was he like?
Oh, old Bill, you know, he was a hard-boiled old cuss, and he never dressed, you know. He always smoked an old black cigar to get her in his mouth, and when I was a relief administrator here, he was governor then yet, and he come there. They went out to Guyman, and the governor from Kansas and Colorado and Ferguson from Texas, all of them met out there at Guyman. That's in the Dust Bowl days, see. And they was going to do something about rain, and they was going to make it rain or do something. And boy, the wind was blowing like the dickens, and I had old Doc Camp and a bunch of them going out there, you know, to Guyman. And we got there in the courthouse, and you couldn't see across the street there in Guyman. And old Bill got up and he said, well, he said, the only way you're going to settle this dust, he says, in this country, is to drill wells, dig wells, and put a pump on it and put a sprinkler there and sprinkle it over here and sprinkle all over, and all of them booed him, you know. And now that's what they got, see. 40 years later, why they got that all over Guyman and all out through that country, them sprinkling systems here.
Yes.
And everybody, they all booed him. And of course, they didn't get it right away, but the last year I was in there, why, we voted and give Goodwill College out there, we give them $100,000 to drill wells, see, and they had dug wells 50 inches across and 300 foot deep, and boy, they had plenty of water, and they put pumps on it, and they irrigated about 40 acres there at the college there at Goodwill, you know, out of them wells, and they had gas come by, and they had a big old Alice Chalmer like your dad had, pumping that, you know, for them pumps.
Yeah.
And they built a big tank, a pond right on top of the ground, dug it all out and used it for the dam around, you know, and now you ought to go down there and see what they got out there now. Now they got 300 acres irrigated. They got 5 of them wells, see? They raise maize out there that goes 125, 150 bushels the acre. Just think of that, right there at that college.
Were you in Oklahoma City when that bridge incident with Texas happened with Bill Murry, the toll bridge?
Yeah, that's why. That's the first bill he won the special session. And
Tell me about that.
Huh?
Tell me about that.
Well, on this side, on our side, see the Red River where the bridge is, it is in Oklahoma. And on the other side, the river was in Texas. And if you'd come from Texas this way, why, they charge you 50 cents to get across, see, with a truck or whatever it was. And if you come from Oklahoma and want to go to Texas, they'd only charge you a quarter. See, Oklahoma was just half as high as Texas. And so when Bill went in there, why, the first bill he had us introduce was to lift that toll, not charge anything. See, and then Texas, they was again that, see. And you could go into Texas for nothing, but you couldn't come back this way without you paying a toll, see. And then you know, all these oil people, these oil magnates, when Bill run, why, they tried to get him, you know, to go for them and raise that price of oil right away from half a dollar to $2 or $3 a barrel, and he wouldn't go for it. They was going to give him money, you know. And just as soon as he got in there, somehow or other, why, he raised it himself from 50 cents a barrel to $1 a barrel, and that was another one of the bills that he called us in for, and he got both of them passed, see. He got that Toll River Bridge passed, and he got that. And then, of course, January, why, he had to get out. See.
What about when he went down, and is that the same toll bridge that he went down and stopped?
Yeah, he sent a militia down there. He had, I don't know, 40 or 50 militia camped there, you know. Oh, they had.
Tell me about that, with the National Guard down there.
Well, he sent them down there before this bill come up, you know, and before I was elected, he sent them down there about 6 months before he went out, and he just had this militia down there, and they was camped all along the river there by the bridge, you know, and they had trouble with Texas, see. But that's why he called that special session. See, I went in, got elected the 6th, and I think it was the 15th, we all went over to Oklahoma City and was sworn in, and he called a special session right then. And we got that all done before the first of the year, see. And then Marland come in, you know.
What kind of governor was Marland?
Well, I think it was a nice old fellow, but you see, he had, Pete Drake was his main man, his hunchman. Oh boy, if he wanted anything done, wanted to see the governor, he'd say, well, you go on in and talk to Pete, see. He wouldn't tell you much himself because they had an organization there, Pete Drake, and he had the Republican Party with him, see. He had one or two on the Board of Affairs. Paul Culver, he owned that ice cream outfit there, and he was a strong Republican, and they put him on Board of Affairs. And every board that he had, he put a Republican on there, see, old Bill do that, see. And if you wanted a job or anything, like they had this hospital down here, and they was only paying $40 a month, see, people working there. And they hired them from all around, and you had to work 5 days, 10, 12 hours a day for $40 down here then. And anyhow, they wanted a job, and they just rode me every time I'd come home. There'd be half a dozen in the yard wanting a job. and they had, old man Moore was his name. He was running the outfit, and he put them on, see. I had a heck of a bunch. They had about 1,900 patients in there at that one time, in the dirty 30s of supply. And they only had one brick building, that was a bakery, and then they had another little office building, and all the rest was old frame buildings, you know, log buildings where old Custer had come through there, you know. They had all them old buildings, and now they've only got the one frame building left out of the whole bunch down there.
When did they close Fort Supply, the military post?
Well, I don't know for sure just when it was, because I went to work down there in 1920 at plumber. I was plumbing there, and they had about 1,900 patients there then, and I got $80 a month for 7 days a week, day and night. They'd call me. I had a place up above. I was single, and had a phone, and that thing would ring at midnight, and they'd say, well, we got a student stopped up here on the so and such ward. Can you get up here right away? He said, we're flooded. So I get out of bed at 12 o'clock at night and grab a plunger and the auger and beat it up there, see. Oh boy, I'll tell you, it was something.
What about Governor Phillips?
Well, Red, he had a sister that taught school over here at Laverne. And I knew her before I knew him. And he was, I don't know, he had a bunch with him, just like Marland. Marland had Pete Drake, and they had a bunch of followers, you know, the get out hunchmen, you know, and Red had a bunch, and he finally got this one fellow over at Laverne, that was Glenn Grace. See, he was on the school board over there, and Red sister was teaching, see, and he got him for his campaign manager here in this county. And he run for Speaker of the House before he was elected governor. And in there, when you're in the House and they're coming up with a bill, and you want to talk, you know, and he's up there, he's looking around, you know, and there you are, 100 of you out there, and they're discussing a bill or something, arguing about it, and you jump up with your hand, and he'll look around, he'll try to find somebody else before he'll recognize you, see, unless you was for him, see, and if you was for him, why, he'd get you right away. But you could tell just as soon as, if you wanted to discuss a bill, you know, just like that coyote bounty bill and stuff like that. But that's a funny thing. Old Red almost supported me on that bill. He's from Okema down there, you know. That's where he's from. And he said they had bobcats, and they was paying the same on bobcats as they was on coyotes. And old Red, I'll go for it. But another one, Jim Nance, you've heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
He finally died here a while back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was floor leader under Marland, see. And Marland wanted me to introduce the bill to have 2 license tags for your car, see. We only had one. There was 3 states, Maine and Massachusetts and Oklahoma just had 1 tag, and every other state had 2 tags. And they wanted that tag, so they got me to introduce the bill. And of course, everybody, it seemed like they had an outfit over here at Tulsa that could make them tags. They had the nuts down there at the penitentiary making the tags, but Jim Nance wanted to get a hold of this bunch here at Tulsa. And it seemed like most all of them voted for him, and the last night, when they get ready to adjourn, they got the clock up there, and they would say, well, we're going to adjourn at 12 o'clock tonight. And they would take and put the American flag over the clock so you can't see it when 12 o'clock comes, see. And then the Senate, the amendments from the House would go to the Senate, and the Senate would come back over there, and they just work like maggots, you know. And Jim Nance come to me and he said, George, he said, I want to put an amendment on that tag deal. And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to put a seal on each end, just like you have on a box car or car, you know, seal with a number on it. So if they break that seal, why, you can send them to the pen over it. And I said, yeah, but who's going to pay for that seal? The fellow that buys a tag has to pay another $50, a quarter apiece for them seals. Well, he said, it won't hurt him, he said, see. So he put that amendment in there, and I got up, you know, and there was, 40 or 50. And I got up and made a motion to strike that amendment on that tag bill, see. And they struck it, and we got the 2 tags, see. And then the next year when we went back again, why, there he was, boy, he was just fighting it, and they went back to 1 tag again. That's what you got now.
Mm-hmm.
And then they was making the tags at one time. They bought them from Arkansas. They made them in the penitentiary then, and then they moved back to McAllister. And then they wanted to get the zinc out of Tulsa and Miami, you know, them zinc mines, and make the tags out of zinc. And they did. They made them 1 year, and you could just bend them just like that, see. So then they quit that, see. And now they got it again. And in today's paper, they're talking about now this manager, they're figuring on doing away with the county commissioners on the tag deal and one thing and another. And they're going to put my daughter, she's treasurer down here, and they're going to put the tag agency in the treasurer's office, see. And that'll be that much more work for them, you know what I mean, see. But you see, the courthouse is closed on Saturday, and the tag agents stay open on Saturday, see. Right now, you can buy a tag here on Saturday, see. You don't have to wait till Monday. And if the courthouse gets it, why, you can't buy a tag till Monday, see. So that's one thing again, see. And I don't know, they're fighting both ways. Some of the county commissioners don't want to lose that power. See, they got lots of power. Commissioner, you know, they got a lot more power than you think they have. They can fire these, well, anything. They can fire anybody who works for the county. Did you know that? The county commissioners? Yeah, they can fire the treasurer, the sheriff, or any of them. I didn't know they could do that until here lately. My daughter, she said, yeah, they could fire me if I don't sue them. Why, if they want to fire me, she said, I'd have a hard time holding my job. See, she's been on 12 years down here.
How could they fire when she's
Well,
elected?
they get them up. Here's a piece in today's paper about Wagner County, county commissioner over there, see. They claim that he used the county's tractors and everything to farm with, see. Well, he's been on a long time. I think he's been on 6 or 8 years. And the other 2 commissioners voted to fire him, see. Well, now he's taking it to Supreme Court. That county county commissioner from Wagner County down there. It's in today's paper there. And so you see well, down here, they did here a while back, they had a janitor working down here, and they claim he stole soap and stuff like that and took home, and so they fired him. They had to get all three of them to consent, to fire him and hire another fellow. Yeah, they can fire you, I guess but they're going to lose a lot of their power if they pass this bill. The court clerk, they're going to change her and let the district judge appoint a court clerk instead of the people voting for it like we do now, see? They're going to bring that bill up right away when they go in, see, and let the people vote on it to see whether they want it that way or not.
Is that one of the things that Nye is working for?
Huh?
Is that one of the things that Nye is working for?
Yeah, he's got his right in there. It says right on the front page there today. Kansas has got that law. They've got a manager, see? And he does all the buying for everything, for whoever needs anything. This manager but does the buying. The commissioner don't have anything to do with it.
What do you think? You think that's a good thing?
Well, it says there that they say that it'll save the county a lot of money, and I can't figure out hardly how it will. Now, I know I've got a son-in-law. He lives in Ashland. He worked in the lumber yard, see, or a grandson. And he said up there, if you go to buy your tag up there and you got a house, you got a trailer, and you own personal taxes on that trailer, when you go to the treasurer to buy your tag, you got to pay for your personal tax before they'll sell you a tag. You got to pay all the taxes that you owe before you can get a tag, see. Yeah, he said. And now that's the same thing. They said they're taking this off after Kansas law. They like Kansas law. And,
Did you ever live on your claim out there?
What do you mean down here?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, we lived there from 1910 to 10 years.
What was your duty in taking care of the farm? What did you do in managing the farm?
Oh, I was just a kid then, and I grew up till I was 20. We raised crops and broom corn and maize, and later on when the First World War ended, I remember we had wheat out and we cut it with a header. And
You weren't in the First World War.
no, I was 18 on June the 22nd, 1918, and that June the 26th I had to register. See. And my brother was 4 years older than me, and he was working for Coopers out here on a big ranch, and they had two boys the same age. And my brother was working for them, and I was doing all the work at home, me and my father, on the farm, see. And old Sam Cooper come down here to the guy that was at the head of it, the father of these two boys, and he gave him $1,000 to not send his boys and my brother. See, my brother's working for him on the ranch down there. And so they put me in 1A, see. And I had a sister 2 years older than me. Later on, she was married, and her husband was a depot agent, and they lived in Cornish, Utah, out there working for them. The government owned the railroads then, see. And if you work for the government, they put you in Class G instead of 1A. Why G1? See, if you work for the government. And he wrote me and told me, he said, we're putting in a big sugar factory here, and we'll have to have a man work for the railroad to go down and check sugar and spot the cars and one thing and another. And if you want the job, he said, you go to Kansas City and there'll be a pass waiting for you there for Union Pacific. And you come out here and go to work, and they'll put you in G, transfer you. But he said, go to your draft board before you come, see. I went down and seen this old boy and told him the deal. And he said, well, he said that, I don't know, George. He said, your brother's out of it, and the Cooper boys is out of it, and somebody's got to go, he said, down in that neighborhood. But he said, if you go, you go, and he said, when you get out there and get on the job, write back and tell me, and I'll have you transferred from out there, see. And I was out there working on November the 7th or 8th, I got a notice from the draft board, see. And it said, come to Salt Lake for examination, see. Even though I had that G and was working for the railroad. And I went down there, and oh God, I got in Salt Lake. There must have been 50 or 100 guys waiting, you know, to be examined. And I kept standing back all the time. These some more old boys. They didn't get us all examined, you know, on the 8th and the 9th. And so they quit then. And we had to stay there for a couple of days. And the last day we went in the morning of the 11th, November, see, 1918. We went back to this government outfit, and there was whistles blowing everywhere, see, and we said there must be a big fire someplace, see.
Mhm.
And here come the captain out, and he said, well, boys, you hear that noise, them whistles? Yeah, what is it, a fire? No, said the war's over, see, November the 11th, 1918. And said, you can go home, go on home, see, that's what he told us.
Well, didn't they give you a discharge?
All he done is just wrote a piece of paper and said the war is over and your services are no longer needed. See?
Mhm.
And
Well, you weren't really in the Army yet, though.
I liked about 2 hours. and I've often wondered if there wasn't some way that you could lie about this other stuff like we used to with broom corn and all that. And lie to the government and get on. Now in a lot of places where you hunt a job, see, they'll ask you if you've been in the service, see. See, they'll ask you, and if you are, why you got a little more privileges than if you wasn't. Did they ever ask you that?
Yeah.
And they'll give you, if one guy was in the service and the other one wasn't, why the guy that was in the service will get the job. See, that's the way it is all over, see.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
when did you get married?
Huh?
Did you ever get married?
Oh yeah, that to
Oh,
my sorrow.
I shouldn't have asked that.
No, I've got 3 girls. My oldest daughter, she's county treasurer down here. See,
Well, you see it.
and then I've got
You shouldn't be so sorry. You've got 3 lovely daughters.
two daughters. Two daughters live in Glendive, Montana, and then my son, my youngest one, he's a city manager in Salina, Kansas.
Well, and you're proud of him.
He's been there 22 years there in Salina. You ever been to Salina?
Yeah.
Pretty good town, ain't it?
Yeah, it's a long way up there.
Huh?
It's a long way up there.
Yeah, I went up there. He used to help me when he was just a kid. He used to help me plug leaks out here on the water line and all that. He's a pretty good plumber. And he got out of the Second World War because he's been married 4 times. He likes it. He likes it. And now he's married this last one that he got. She ain't 5 feet tall, and her husband was a 6'6" copper in Salina. And they was both working for the city, and my son working there. And he got a divorce from his wife, and then this copper got a divorce from this little woman, and they just changed wives, swapped wives, see?
Oh,
See?
yes.
And of course he ain't had no children. He's got a boy, adopted boy now from this last one he's got. She works in the office at Salina, and he's got about 15, 20 men work with him. See, on the streets and sewers and all that stuff. They come down here once in a while, about once or twice a year. I went up there, I worked up there about a month or 2 helping build these manholes for sewers, you know. I done all that brickwork.
Who was your wife?
She used to live here west of Supply, about 4 or 5 miles. She's married again. She lives up there in Montana,
Oh.
up there with the kids.
Mhm.
She ain't very big, and she married a guy about 6'7" or 8", and he run the liquor store in Montana. Now there's another thing. In Montana, the government, or the state owns a liquor store. You can't put in a liquor store up there. The state's got them in every town, see? Some towns they got 2 or 3 in there, and they hire the help, see? They put 1 or 2 in each liquor store. And you go in there to buy a pint, and he'll give you a little card to give your name, you know, and everything on there, and it costs you a quarter. And you can keep that card and go to the next town and present that, and you can buy a pint of whiskey, see, whatever you want, see. That's the law in Montana. And she married this old boy. He's got 3 or 4 kids. She married him. He runs a liquor store there. He don't anymore. he run for marshal there, and he was elected, and he's got 2 or 3 kids. One son lives in Boise, Idaho. He's a lawyer. I met him, pretty good fella. And now her husband, he's got 4 or 5. They got 4 or 5 shacks rented up there, you know. Was you ever up in Montana, up in that country?
No, not in through there.
Boy, it gets cold up there.
Yeah, I was up at Billings, Montana.
I was up there, Wolf Point. That's 100 miles from. And while I worked there at Glasgow on that dam there, that Fort Peck Dam, I worked there tied reinforcing rods on that.
I was going to ask you, in Salt Lake City, was there a big celebration on Armistice Day?
Oh yeah.
What'd you do that day?
Well, I got on the first train and went back to Cordish. Cordish was about 60 miles north of Ogden. See, and I went back to work, see. Oh boy, they had, and there along the mountain there, old Brigham Young, you know, he had all his castles. There were 16. He had 16 different wives, and they never got mad at each other. That's why I can't understand how women could get along. I seen a piece in the paper here the other day where he had 126 kids. And I don't know how many great-grandkids and all that told in there, way up in the hundreds, see. And he's got, it's still yet, they're still there. They're all along that mountain along there, you know, northeast of Salt Lake. 16 cabins there were. He had 16 different wives.
That's why they didn't have trouble. They each had a different house.
And they're all Mormons. 9 out of 10 of them are Mormons. I was going to go to work out there. A fellow said he was at Bird's Eye Canning Company, you know, Bird's Eye groceries and canned stuff. You know, they had a big Bird's Eye outfit there in Cornish. And a fellow, he'd come there, and he was working there, and he said, George, when you get through here with the railroad, you have to go home. He said, why don't you go to work in the Bird's Eye over there with me? And I said, you think I could get on? And he said, yeah. He said, I'll pick you up and go over there. And he said, they're wanting help. So I went with him, and the boss come, you know, and he said, what are you? He said, what's your religion? He said, are you a Mormon? I said, oh no, I'm not a Mormon. And he said, well, we can't use you. And they wouldn't hire me because I wasn't a Mormon, see? And it was about 3 miles from town. And this old boy I rode with, he was at the other end of the building. And I said, well, I guess I'll have to walk back. And this fellow said, no, I'm going in pretty soon. I'll give you a ride back. But he said, I sure hate it. He said, I thought you was a Mormon. Couldn't get a job.
You never have told us where you went to school and how far you got into school.
I went to grade school out here in the country, see, and then it was 8 miles from there to Supply to high school, see. And they didn't have no buses or anything, school buses, so we had to go horseback. And another boy that lived there by me, each one of us had a horse, that Lewis Loomis, you know, we'd ride to Supply. And oh boy, in the wintertime it was something, snow 2-3 feet, and damn, boy, I'll tell you, some places 8 and 9 foot deep where it drifts, you know. And I went 1 year, first year in high school. That's as far as I went. I never went no farther.
Do you remember the blizzard of 1911?
Yeah, well, this girl over here, Irene Page, wrote all about that, you know, in that book. 11 and 12, and then 13. It lasted 3 years each winter, each year, and they was putting all this railroad in from Woodward to Supply and all up through there in 1913, and they had drifts, boy, 8 and 10 foot deep where they working, you know, putting that. So yeah, I remember that. Boy, I tell you, it was something. Can you remember?
No. I was going to ask you, who are the biggest bootleggers in this area?
Bootleggers?
Yeah.
Well, you're not a policeman, are you?
No, I'm not a policeman.
No, we got one right in here, this old man Bus. He wasn't a bootlegger, what you call it, he made it, you know, they made it, you know, moonshine. Here's Christmas coming, it seems sound like.
He made all the moonshine around here.
Oh gosh, they had half a dozen of them. They had half a dozen or more making it. They'd make it.
Where do we get that on?
Some of them would make it out of corn, and some of it would make it out of raisins, and it's a bunch of high school kids. There was great kids. They sing up here, you know, and go back in there. But they had them all over here. They had them. They're bootleggers. They call it white lightning and all that stuff. They'd sell some of it. Sell it for $5 a gallon, and if you buy 5 gallons, they'd sell it to you for $4.
Well, that was during Prohibition days, wasn't that during Prohibition days?
We've got one or two right now in this county still doing it, still making it. One over here by the river, and they've never done nothing to him. He still sells it. He comes in town here on a Saturday.
I want to ask you, when I was working on our book, they told me there was a spring, a freshwater spring or something that had the fish in it that was alive at the prehistoric days. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I
Do
don't
you?
know. You take Dobie Springs out there, you see that creek comes right by here, and you can several places along there. There's lots of fish where you can catch fish, see, catfish, and they stopped at Dobie Springs when I run the relief. I built a dam right there, see, with the relief, see, and now it's stopped out there, and it's got, oh, they catch them out there with 6-7 pounds. Fell over Fargo at Rawson caught one the other day. Big blue cat weighed 7 pounds out of that pond there at Dobie Springs.
Yeah.
And then I had it stopped, see, in the dirty 30s. When we got it all done, got all this fresh water come down through there. This game ranger, R.D. Gray, and I went over here to Burlington where they got that fish hatchery. We had 10-gallon cans, cream cans, about 10 of them. We went over there and got about 5,000 crappie and bass about 3 or 4 inches long. We put in there, and boy, it wasn't long. You could go, and the water just as clear as a crystal, see, and about 6-7 foot deep, and you could just stand there and see them and just throw anything in there, you know, and boy, they grab it right now. And in 1 year, they weigh 2 and 3 pounds. And since then, they've restocked it, I don't know how many times. Dobie Springs, where we get our water from out there.
While you were serving in the legislature in Oklahoma City, what were some of the major bills that you worked on?
Well, about the first one, it was them two that Bill Murry went, that the special session, see, and then when we got in, Marland went over, why, Harper and Turner wanted to lease that land from the capital south, see, you know where them oil wells are now, see, there's 5 oil wells there right now. And Harper and Turner, just the width of that street, you know how it is, I think it's about 10 acres. And they wanted it done in Marland. Marland was a real oil man, you know. And Harper, he was later on, Roy Turner later on was elected governor, you know, there of Oklahoma. But her and Harper used to live here at Supply. He married Roy Turner's sister. And they were in together on that, and they give $5,000 for the lease from the Capitol building south. Just about 2 or 3 blocks, ain't it? They've got 2 or 3 oil wells there now, 4, you know, along there. And that first well nearest to the Capitol made 5,000 barrels a day. That first well that they drilled. And they give $5,000 for that lease.
They've been down this east wing.
Okay.
The school teacher lives right over here. He's got 2 or 3 kids that go to little school down here, and he had some coon dogs, and he did have me go with him, and we went back up north before I got hurt when I first moved in here. And coons is high, boy, they was getting as high as $50 and $60 for a hide. And I went up there with him one night, and we caught 8 up north here where my daughter
When was this?
Oh, that was about 3 years ago, before I got hurt. I went with him. That's up north here. Willard. he knows what's up north, 12, 14 miles up there, and there's a good creek there, you know, and my daughter and them had some of the land rented there. She said there's an old coon had a bunch of little ones up there. In summertime, they'd seen them several times, and so I took him up there. He had his old coon, 2 coon dogs, went up there. He took the dogs and went down the creek, and I went around about 3 miles, and I waited for him, you know. And I could hear the old howl of the beller, you know. And finally he come, and he only was dragging, carrying about 3 or 4 of them. Some was only half grown, see, and he had the old one. And I had to go back with him and pick the darn coons up. Stennett is his name over here, you know him. Yeah, I don't know whether he hunts this winter or not. He'd go out every winter. He'd get as high as $50, $60 for one of them big coons.
Can you tell me about the dust storms around here?
Oh yeah. That was in the dirty 30. I was farming then I was farming about 1,200 acres of wheat.
Tell me about wheat harvest in the old days.
Well, then we used a header. They went together, these farmers. They had a header barge, and they used 6 horses on the header, see, and they pushed the head. They pushed it, see, 3 on each side. All the header was in front of you, and the horses pushed it. And then they had a barge, and then they had some binders where they bound it, and then they'd haul it in when they had a thrash machine come and thrash it. But now they got the combines, you know.
When did you see your first combine?
Well, I don't know, it must have been, I was working down at Supply, I think about 1925. When they first come in, they had to pull it with horses then. Right as you come out of Supply around that curve this way, you know, where you have to dodge around, well, right there's where the first combine was unloaded, and they cut that wheat right there between there and the river, see, on that side of the road. They had 6 head of horses on it. It was an old Alice Chalmers where it was. But I farmed all that land from Supply back south to the lake, all in there. 1,080 acres. I had 1,080 acres there, and I had over 1,000 acres up here. I had 2,200 acres one year, and I brought my son-in-law and all his brothers up in Montana come down here with 6 combines. See, 18, 20, 22 foot combines, 6 of them, they come down. And I'd have them cut up here, and I would go down there and cut, see. And I had 42,000 bushels of wheat that year, the most wheat was ever raised in this.
What year was that?
Let's see, I was living here 45 or 46 is when it was.
Can you tell me, were there
Got
many?
$1.25 a bushel left, $1.25 a bushel.
Were there many Germans in this area in the First World War?
Well, they had that camp over here at Dodge City, prisoner camp over there, Germans, you know, Japs, or I mean at Alva. You know where Alva is?
Yeah. Was that World War I, World War II?
That was in World War II.
Yeah. What about World War I?
Well, I don't know much about the prisoners. I was gone most of the time, see. But we had like all these Zainers, like I was telling you, this Pete, you know, they was all Germans. They came over from Germany, and he fought in the First World War.
I was going to say, was there much hatred towards Germans in that war?
Well, like him, he fought on the German side. This Pete that I sold a quarter from, you know, and bachelor, he come over, and he couldn't speak English. But my father and mother were both Germans, see. And then at home, when we were kids, they never talked English. They always talked German. They didn't want us to know what they're talking about, see. And so I learned a lot of, like, counting and different things, you know, like that.
This Zainer, is he still around?
One of them here, the woman's here, she used to teach school, see. But the old man died, and then her husband died, see. And we just lived 3 feet apart in Chicago, these Zainers and my dad and them, see? And they worked together all the time, and when they left, they had a boy about 6, 7 years old, and they had a little girl about 4, and they come out here. And then when we come out here, why, I was 10, we had to walk about 3 miles to school, and I'd go by their house and pick this boy up, see? And he couldn't speak a word English. And there I'd take him to school, you know, and I'd have to do the best I could with him. And he finally done all right, and he married this woman right here. It's here now, see? At Albert Zahner, see?
Yeah.
And they got 3 or 4 pretty nice kids. And of course, they don't know nothing about German now. But
Did you want to leave Chicago?
want to leave it?
Did you want to when your family moved down here?
Oh, no, I didn't want to, because all they talk about was canyons. And I thought they made cannons that you shoot people with, see? He'd talk about the big canyons out here, and I'd say, how many people do they kill with them? Well, they don't kill nobody with them. And then when they got out here, why, we had canyons, see? But I can't figure out how, or growed up, and how they got these roads fixed around here. They had you'd have to work your poll tax out, you know, on the road, and they'd go down them hills. It beat anything you ever saw, how they got by them years. I've eaten lots of jackrabbits and cottontails and quails then. We never shoot a quail on a run or on a wing. You shoot them in pot shots so you get 10 or 12. The old man, he'd get mad if you'd waste them shells.
Well, they cost money, didn't they?
About a cent and a half a piece then.
Yes, but that was being saving, wasn't it? Do you remember the first car you ever saw?
Yeah, I remember
What was it?
it. It was a Model T with a brass radiator
Uh-huh.
when they come out here.
Uh-huh.
In 1960, it was about 14 or 15 when I first, old Sam Cooper had it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he used to go north of Supply. The highway went then, you know, through them hills.
When did you folks buy one?
Well, I got mine after I come back from Utah in 1920. When I come back. Traded 300 bushel of wheat for it. Wheat was worth $3 a bushel then, and I gave him 300 bushel of wheat for this car, and I don't know what all. The
What
car
make?
was only $600, but I
What
bought
make was it?
Ford Model
Ford.
T.
Model T
Yeah, with a brass radiator.
costs $900.
No, it didn't cost that much, but I bought a boat and all that with it, see?
Oh.
See, that car, I think, was $600.
I see.
600 or 610, something like that. I bought. The building's still alive, down there at Supply on the north side. That's where the garage was, see, 1920.
How big was the town of Fort Supply when you lived there?
Oh, when I first come here, it's bigger than it is now. What I mean, there was more shacks around, you know. A lot of shacks uptown, see. But now they've done away with all them and built pretty nice houses. I think they had about 800 people there, and that's all they got now, see. There's only 800 people there. His wife teaches school down there. Did you know that? That's why he's retired, see.
Who's telling on you?
Yeah, I tried to get him to have her teach school here, and all. She said she liked the kids down there. She don't like the kids up here, see. She'd rather like to go down and Supply.
Mm-hmm. What else? Do you have any?
But I'll tell you this here, they built a bridge, the old highway, used to go in north of Supply, not where it is now, see where you come out of Supply. It's a mile east of there, and that bridge, they built that bridge in 20. I drove the pile driver on it in 1920, and it's still in there. It's still in there, but they built another bridge alongside of it last year, see? And it stayed in there, that old wooden bridge stayed in there when them floods was big and washed this other concrete bridge, the one you come over, they washed the whole south end of it out. And that other old bridge a mile east there, it stayed in there. And they had to go around, clean around and go across that way for about a year until they fixed this other bridge up down there.
And George, what was your part in the building of the dam down there?
Well, I just introduced the bill, and then I got Floyd Harrington and a whole bunch of them to sign with me, see, co-authors, see?
Yes.
And I introduced the bill for the governor. He's the one that had it. In the same way with the homestead exemption, you had a $100,000 a year homestead exemption. I introduced the bill for that. They all voted for it here, see, but it had to go through the legislature before it went in effect. And now it's still in effect. You know, you got a $1,000 homestead exemption, and that's what the people voted it, see? But it had to go through the legislature, and that bill, that $1,000 exemption bill, and the coyote bounty bill, and the dam bill down here. And then High Arnold got me to introduce a bill to move the highway outfit away from Woodward, move it up here, see? See, I introduced a bill to do that, and we moved it up here, see? So, moved it away from Woodward. And I like to got killed over that deal.
How come?
Oh, they didn't want it done, see? They slept on the job. Highway was a big shot under Bill Murry, see? Highway commissioner he was chairman of the Highway Commission. And old Bill put him in there. And then when Marland went in, why, they was going to kick him off right away. And we got all these guys out here, Tommy Wright and all them, you know, to go down there and talk to Marland. And they kept old Hyatt on. He was on 8 years. See,
Yes.
he was served under Bill and under Marland and part of the time under Red Phillips.
How many years did it take you to build the dam down
Little over a year,
there? A little over a year.
yeah. They had fellas haul rock from all out east here on them hills over there, you know, they dynamited and they'd have rocks big as that chair, weigh a ton. And they had old Model T trucks and they could only haul 1 or 2 rocks, you know, all the way around this way and up through this. And then they had jackhammers down there. They'd unload them and break it and then throw it off over the dam on the south side. But they had over 1,000 working down there. They had them from all over. My brother-in-law, he was a shop foreman and he had charge of all the trucks and the bulldozers and all that stuff, see.
How many men did you have working for you when you were
Relief?
administrator? Here in
Well,
the county.
we registered women and men both, see. And we would register them from 14 years on, see, on account of their mother might be a widow, and we let the kid work, see, if he was big enough to drive a team or something. And the women, we planted black-eyed peas down here on Jim Logan, 15 acres. And when they got ripe, ready to cook, Bill sent me 15 pressure cookers, great big 6-quart pressure cookers, Bill Murray, see. And we hired a bunch of these women go down there, you know, and pick them. And then he sent me about 25 cases of quart fruit jars, see. And then he sent me 2 or 3 cases of shotgun shells, and we had rabbit drives around here. And they had a Jew from St. Louis come and he bought the rabbits for 10 cents a piece, see. And
What year was that?
That was in 32 or 33, or about 33, the Dust Bowl days, see, when I was relief administrator. And they sold them rabbits 10 cents a piece.
Did you do any work for WPA?
Me?
Yeah.
No, that's when I went off. See, when Roosevelt went in, Bill couldn't get along with him. When Hoover went in, old Bill would call him up and say, I want 20,000 or 100,000, and old Hoover would send her. And then, well, Bill run again to Roosevelt, you know that. And he only carried Oklahoma, see. Well, just like this other guy, he only carried one state, didn't he?
Minnesota.
And, but old Bill, he carried Oklahoma. And he didn't like Roosevelt, see. And then when they changed over, see, from the relief to WPA, why, they got a new setup and they wanted to keep us on, see. But old Bill made us all quit. He wouldn't let one of us administrators, superintendents, work for the other ones, WPA, and then he put George Crawford on down here. And that's when they did have trouble. See, you had to be certain kind of fella to get on that WPA, and they went down at the courthouse, and he was in his office, and they kicked the door down upstairs in the courthouse. He wouldn't let them talk to him. And they went down to the sheriff, and he wouldn't do nothing about it, so they just went old Dude Wolf, and them went up there and kicked the door down, up on the second floor down here, because he wouldn't talk to them, see. And then he began to put them to work. Oh, I had Edna Mix down here. She worked her $15, $20 out, and then the county paid her 10 or 15. And Fat Switz, I had him. That was and then Ralph Clark come in, and they'd bring in hams, little hog hams, weigh 6 pounds, and so a whole truckload. And I'd have these black-eyed peas, you know, and I'd give them so many quarts, depending on how many they had, how many kids, see. And I'd give them 5 or 6 of these little hams, and then give them school books and clothes and all that, and boy, it was a heck of a job. When I first started, why, we just had $1,000, and the last month I was in, pretty near 2 years, why, I got $40,000. And all this stuff, see, all these clothes and bins and school books and everything, shoes.
Was that relief program better than the WPA program?
Well, when I quit, we had 1,600 registered, and I'd have to change shifts every day, you know. They could only make 10 or 12 or $14, and then I'd have to go on the job and put another crew on, see, and there was about 1,600 registered altogether here in the county.
What was the population of the county about that time?
6,000.
6,000.
But I had a lot of women were working, girls 13, 14 years old, canning black-eyed peas and sewing and all that stuff. We had this Miss Jones that's up here now. She was a head woman sewer. She was down there at May, and then canning them peas and fruit. They got a lot of fruit down here, and they can that fruit and give it to them, see.
What did the WPA do around here?
Well, they had a lot of projects started, see, I did with my outfit, road work, and see, building little culverts and all that stuff. And when I went out, they just stopped all of that, and they started this new program, see. And then he had to put all new foremen on. He'd come to me and say, who's the best foreman, and I'd tell him who I had, see. And then he'd put them on, and they paid more, see. And they was building this road from here to Supply through these hills, you know, and then contractors would come to me and say, I want 20 men, see. Well, and then they give them 40 cents an hour, see, working, driving teams and stuff. And then when the WPA come along, why, they wouldn't furnish hardly any men for them. They had an awful time. But what they didn't like here, there he was, and he had an assistant, then he had 2 secretaries, and then he had a guy that was in charge of the payroll. He had about 12 working in his office, and it took about $2,000 or $3,000 a month for payroll for them instead of going out like I did, see? And they had a heck of a time down here. They fighting all the time.
How did you manage the CCC boys here?
That's what?
The CCC
Oh.
boys.
I was running it then when the CC boys come in. They was out west of town, and they brought up here. I don't know. They'd register with me, see, and they'd come in here, and they'd send them from other counties. See, like our sheriff here, he come in from way down south, and he married one of the girls here. He was in the CC, and there's 4 or 5 here boys now that married home girls here that was in the CC. And they planted them trees. See them trees there? The CC boys put them in. That
You
row
mean
of
these
trees.
right here?
Yeah, all that row of trees there. Not this one, but all them big trees, see? They've been in there since the early 30s.
Well,
Is that a shelter belt?
Huh?
Is that a shelter belt?
Yeah, they built them all over the county. They've got, I don't know whether you got any down there or not. You ain't got none, but Hazel's got one out here. And there's, I don't know, 10 or 12. And then they built tanks. They had an old boy and they had their truck, the CC boys, and they built concrete tanks out on these ranches. You furnish the sand and the cement, and they'd go build them for nothing. They had the forms, see.
What about the cement outhouses? Heard they
Oh,
built
they
those.
built them. I was running that outfit. I had his dad's place rented right down here. And they built this bridge across this creek out here. And contractor sold me what cement they had left and all the form lumber and all that. See, I had about 50, 60 sacks of cement and that reinforcing iron and all them forms under that bridge for $100. And I had his place rented from his dad down here, and we had that Roosevelt toilets is what we called them. And we had one bunch in there making them, carpenters making them. If we go out here in the country and dig a hole and furnish a slab and a new toilet for $15. Do it all for $15. Dig the hole and everything.
Well, where did these boys eat and sleep?
Ooh, you mean this
The
CC?
boys. Did you
Oh,
have a
gee,
camp
they
for 'em?
got big place out west of town here. Now
they
the
did?
county's got it now.
I
See,
see.
the government gave them all them mess halls and we got a pretty nice place out west
Well,
of
that
town.
kept the boys out of mischief, didn't it?
Well, they done good work. There was a lot of them here, strangers, and they come in and they brought some niggers in here that was musicians and stuff like that from down around Fort Sill. And they'd go down here when they'd have a football game and they'd play, and boy, you never seen guys could play instruments like them niggers. And these merchants here in this town wouldn't sell them anything to eat. And they had a white boss, see, sergeant over them, see, these niggers. And he'd go into these butcher shops and places like that and buy the meat, and they just sit out there on the truck. This outfit right here in this town got to where they wouldn't even sell them nothing, see. The sergeant had to go in and get it for them, clothes and everything. They was up here, 3 or 4 months. And boy, they had a good band. They had about 25 of them. All
Why were they doing up here? Why were they sent up here?
CC, they was CC.
Oh, okay.
They was brought in from down around Fort Sill, other counties, see.
Well, weren't they given so much money and then they had to send so much money home?
Yeah, they got so much a month, see, I forget, it wasn't very much, about $30 or $40. And then they sent about 10 or 15 home each month. And the CC gave them clothes, see, they wore, and then they got all their eats, and they slept here, they had cots and all that. Well, they had coal shipped in here. They had, 2 or 3 coal cars of coal, and they piled it up out there, and they burned coal stoves, And when they moved out of here, I lived out west of town here on that poor farm, and I bought, 20 ton of coal off them for $10, 50 cents a ton, because I had steam heat out there, in the boiler.
Yeah.
And I used relief work to haul it out there.
That was our first good hospital across the creek.
First there was a nursing home, see, poor farm. They had that when I was running relief, and then later on the county took care of the people, see, and they moved out, and then the doctor, he bought it and made a hospital out of it. 16 rooms out there.
What was the doctor's name?
Dr. Camp. They got a camp over here at Enid, but they're no relation. He spells his K, and this doctor spells his C, C-A-M-P, and that one spells his K-A-M-P.
There's a big store in Oklahoma City called Camps, K-A-M-P. The Camp brothers came there in 1910, set up a store.
Yeah, when I stayed down there, I stayed at the old Kincaid Hotel.
Yeah.
And then later I stayed at the Huckins, and I stayed over at the Wells Roberts, and now they're all gone.
They're all gone.
See? And later I stayed over at the Black, and I stayed over at the Biltmore, and they tore it all down. I can't figure that out. All them nice hotels, and I haven't been down there since they tore the Kincaid down. I don't know what it looks like down in Oklahoma City.
Nothing.
Are you getting tired?
Me? I never get tired. See what it says there, 5 o'clock? It'd be our bean time in about 10 minutes.
Well, we better
Yeah.
bring
You
this
want
we
some
better.
beans? I'll get some and send home with you. Black-eyed peas, I'll get you some if you want
That's
some.
good eating. Okay. Sir, thank you.